everybody. Great to have you on board. I'm Scott Murray.
And I'm Dr. Nina Rios-Doria.
And we welcome you to Conversations of Connection, mental wellness in sports and in life.
Yes, and I love the title of our show that we created. And what is it about? Conversations of connection. That word connection just resonates with us in different ways. Connection in relationships, talking and discussing and being open is great, but also connection of the mind and body.
And with all those folks right out there.
And yes, and how we, manage our thoughts and manage our mind. And that's what the show's about, is really how can we really help ourselves be more mentally healthy. And so having guests on to share their testimony, their story, we hope inspires you as well.
In connections nowadays, here in 2021, after what we all endured in 2020 through the pandemic, another world.
Yeah.
Craziness personified.
Yes, it was. And so it's nice to be starting to have like a real life again and having our first guest on the show, which we're excited to share with you.
Familiar name, you might not know her, but she's a special lady, and she has a special story she's going to share with us today. Her name is Michelle Staubach, and we are delighted to welcome you. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello.
First of all, how's the family?
All's well. Everyone's, getting starting to see each other more.
Good.
It's good to see
Your dad, Roger, one of the greatest football players in the history of the game, Heisman Trophy winner, 1963 at the Naval Academy, then went on to become one of only 10 players to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame and have won the Heisman Trophy when he was in college.
So pretty select group. 10 now?
It's up to 10. This summer it will be 10.
OJ and he were the first his year.
Yeah, isn't that something?
They were the first Heisman Trophy winners that went into
the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
And OJ kept saying I went first since I'm SI versus ST.
Well,
now that doesn't.
Well, we all know what your dad stands for, above and beyond, and one of my favorite people on the face of this earth. So we're delighted to welcome you. Yes. Say hello to your mom, Marianne, and the rest of the family, your sisters and your brother Jeff.
Yep.
And we're delighted, though, to welcome you. Why have we asked you to come here today? Tell us about your story, just very briefly, and then Dr. Nina and I will get into some questions for you.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, we know each other, and I've you asked me to come talk really about mental health, and it's something I've struggled with my whole life, and it really because there was not a lot known as a child. I mean, I didn't really address it till my 30s when I kind of talked with my internist, and she said, Michelle, you've had a lot of these episodes, and that's when I really started to understand what I had experienced through life was these depressive episodes, OCD. And so, and it wasn't I kept it a secret, but I did decide to go public when a reporter asked me in like November 2019. So I did give my story, and then that, got attention. And I felt it was important to tell my story to erase the stigma. Mm-hmm. And others can't. I mean, they're worried about losing a job or, and for me, I felt, okay, I can tell my story because that's a real, we're getting there where it should be just like having cancer, right? Anybody can talk about it and feel very comfortable with it.
Some of the things that you endured, to someone that's out there watching today and says, well, what were some of the things that she's talking about? Gee, I felt depressed. I felt concerned about how I deal with my things day to day. What's can you be specific?
Yeah, so I can go back as far as, when I was young, like first grade. I remember I had this, I think I probably took everything real literally because I grew up in the same household with my siblings, and they're like, what, you're still thinking about that? And I'm like, yes. I had this fear of death, and I don't, know exactly where it came from. And this whole idea of eternity, I remember crying a lot about that when I was young to my mom. Really, I can say, when I was in fifth, sixth grade, I was, which now I realize is really an OCD symptom. I was convinced I had a brain tumor, like so convinced that I talked about it, like that I did talk about. And enough that when I was in my 30s and had to have an MRI for migraines, my sister's like, oh, I wonder if they're going to find that brain tumor you had in sixth grade. So, you got to have some humor. And so my parents did take me to a psychologist because they knew something was off. But, they just didn't know a lot then, and I did not like the psychologist at all. And I say that, and I'm sure she's done great things for a lot of people. There wasn't a lot known then, I think, about OCD, and I know that when I look back, I did a lot of those rituals, washing hands, counting things, more of the OCD is really divided kind of, and I'm not.
Say what OCD for someone.
So it's obsessive compulsive disorder,
right?
And I'm not an expert, but I've read a lot on it. I mean, there's also where that you do repetitive rituals, because if you don't, there's no relation. It's not like, I'm not like the movie Sleeping with the Enemy where everything's in order in my house. Like, no, like I'm not like that. But you if you don't count to 100, then my sister's gonna die. I mean, there's no logic to it, and they have found, they call it brain lock, that there may be like the brain kind of, we all have fleeting thoughts, like did we turn off the coffee pot, right? Or did I close my garage door? And you may go back once or twice and look. I would do that like 100 times.
Did you find that this also triggered anxiety and depression for you as well growing up?
Yeah, I think probably, it's all tied
all
together.
Connected.
Right, they're finding. And so I really remember that as being the first, and it made no sense, right? I have to say, it was like my psychiatrist in my 40s, he said, when I kind of told him my whole history, he said, Michelle, that makes sense almost to me that you were obsessed about a brain tumor, because your brain hurt. You didn't know how to process what was going on. And I'm like, wow, that does make sense. Yeah. It's probably why I had this obsession about, and like OCD, you're hypochondriac too. If you have a lump, you think that, for sure it's cancer. So I said when I was younger, it was a lot of rituals and things like, when I could drive, if you go over a speed bump, and it sounds so crazy to people that don't know it, you think, oh, what if that was a person? Mm-hmm. And you'll go back and look like 50 times.
Let me ask you this, as you've been when you're working with your therapist, for how many years? When did you first see your therapist?
So I saw that psychologist briefly, and like I said, everyone says there has to be a connection. And that's why I think it's really important to tell parents, especially with kids, that if your child is not like there's a lot of therapists out there. Yes. It's all about that trust and connection. Yep. And so I saw that psychologist for a while, and then I just begged my mom, please, I don't want to go anymore. Right? Yeah. I did find her as an adult, and went and talked to her to ask what she remembered, and she did say she didn't remember anything about OCD, because I'm sure, I know I didn't tell her, and she said I didn't want to talk. Yeah. And but she said that you definitely were depressed. And
Well, I love that you just said that. I think it's important for everyone to hear is that it's okay if you don't connect with the first therapist that you meet, and speak up and that the parents are okay with you shifting. Doesn't mean you don't want therapy, but you do have to find someone that you feel safe with, that you trust. To have that relationship, to be open, to be vulnerable. So when you found that therapist, what things about that therapist helped you really to start sharing your story and feel comfortable and really get improvement? So
I really then I didn't treat it. I mean, I didn't realize, I look back in like high school, and I mean, I have these episodes, which I now look back were depression, but I didn't know it. And so that's why I think it's hard for my parents. They think, could we have done more? But I didn't express what I was going through.
Because you didn't know.
I didn't know
what was going on.
And then I lived away up east for 8 years when I did my undergrad in law. So I was away from my family. And so they didn't, see day to day. So I really started regularly seeing a therapist in my mid-30s after I had my last child. And that was the first time but I had come across a book when I was cruising just in a bookstore, like on a business trip somewhere, that was called Brain Lock by Jeffrey Schwartz. Okay. And it's about OCD. And I started flipping through it, and I'm like, this is exactly what I've done my whole life. And so that, made me realize, oh, okay. And then he talks about those rituals, and then there's also ruminating obsessive thoughts. Yeah. And that's more what consumes me as an adult, I've realized, I think is my trigger for depression. Yeah. And so I really stay on top of that. So it was 30s when I first saw a psychiatrist.
And then you recognize, okay, I have OCD, and now I can get help. I can work through it.
Right.
And then that's when there was probably hope for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't. I was lucky not to have like suicidal ideation, but there were times when, I just felt like I did what I had to do. People are like, "How'd you get through law school?" And at the time, I was living by myself in D.C. in an apartment. Well, law school is very structured, so I knew I had to, I could do what I had to do, and that was all I just had to do that and take care of myself, and wasn't like blowing out the A's or whatever, but I was able to do something, but you do withdrawal, and then and that's why I think it's important people speak out and talk so they recognize symptoms, and then they can recognize them in friends.
Let's talk about the dynamics of your family. When you went to the East, you said you were up there for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
You went to college, so you're what?
So I went to
18,
college
19
when I was
years old?
18 in D.C., and then I worked for a year in the government, and then I stayed there and went to law school for 3 years. So I was in D.C.
So you were single at the time, though?
All single at the time, yes.
Single, okay. So you got married.
Mm-hmm. But I got married, yes.
Okay.
Later, back in Dallas.
Right. And when did you confide in your husband or husband-to-be know what was about to be a part of his life?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, share that.
Yeah, I'm curious about the dynamics of that because we know your folks. Your folks have been supportive. You talk about your mom, and now you go off on your own. Now you're going to build your own family, and I just wondered if it got better or if it went downhill or what the trust factor you had in your husband. And then, of course, you have children. So you're going to, I'm sure, concerned about your children enduring the same things that you had to go through or that you had gone through.
Right. So really, though, nobody, I can say really, since it was my 30s, no, I hadn't talked to my husband about it because I really didn't know what I had. Mm-hmm. And so I think I had... when our youngest, who's 18, was 3, I went through a depressive episode, and he was very supportive. And then I had the more serious one in 2017 summer where I did do ECT. And so, he's like, wow, it's my fault, I've realized, too, for not educating, my family, my husband, on mental health. I realized that was a big gap of not, and also about the mental health community, and how people want people to talk. Because it's my story, but it does affect them, and some want their privacy.
I think that's so good that what you just said for everyone listening is just educating your children and your teens about mental health and the importance of it. What is it? What does it look like? What does it look like to be mentally healthy and okay? And when you're not feeling that way, what do you do? And just to start having that conversation with your family. Yeah. And when you had it with your father and you started sharing with your family, I know you shared with your husband, was that uncomfortable? How did that go? And to help people that want to share their story with their family, what words of encouragement do you have for them?
I really think when I shared it was when I really was in a dark time and needed help. So everybody was very supportive. And that's, again, where I realized when I probably should have had, like, my kids go to therapy then just to understand, what I was going through. At the time, when they were little, they didn't realize it. But when, like 2017, two were one in grade school and 2 in high school. I do think it affected them a lot. And when I went to tell my story public, I made sure they were fine with it, and they were, and so that was, that it was important that my kids and John, were fine with that. With my name, of course, the story, it helps to have the name because then people think anybody can have it.
Yeah.
But that's hard too because, my dad has lived such a public life. Now he's doing everything to, like, I always say, debrand himself.
And
live a private life right now. And then he's like, oh, okay, great. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're hearing that you're speaking. And one of the things Scott and I were talking about, just being that you're in a healthier place and then the pandemic hits, how did that affect not just you, your family, but people around you? And what did you do? How did you handle
So I'm a people person and like to be out and touch and hug. And so luckily I was mentally healthy, because that's, can be, I think we're going to see lingering effects of mental health from COVID. I can say I'm pretty worn out now, and I haven't lost any.
And let me jump in there and say why. Be specific.
Of just not regular life and being with people. I haven't hugged my parents in a year, and
it's emotional.
So and we used to, all get together at the lake in the summer, and we didn't do that. And so there's, everyone's afraid because, there's 5 of us. There's 5 of us kids. I have 4 siblings, and then all these grandkids.
And where are you in that order?
So I'm the second. So
Okay.
my sister Jennifer.
So Jennifer's the oldest.
The oldest,
And
then me, and then
Okay.
Stephanie. And the 3 of us were born within those 4 years while my dad was serving in the Navy before he came to play for the Cowboys. And then there's a 6-year gap. And then my brother and sister were born. So we were almost like 2 families growing up. So I was like kind of the middle child out of the first 3.
Okay.
And so, I think it's been hard because then it's afraid to be around our parents. What if someone's kid has it exposed to someone? And so I think like any families, we've had our challenges this year over that. And that's been...
It's been tough.
Not being able to be together.
Yeah. And so what have you done, though, to maintain your mental health through it all? Even though it's been challenging as it has for many and it's been hard, what has been really good for you?
Trying gratitude journal, writing. And then during that time, I went back to practicing law. And you say, during the pandemic. But I always wanted to, I was a lawyer, and before I had kids, I always wanted to use my law degree to help others later. And so I joined the Innocence Project board during the pandemic. So it was all by Zoom. But then I got involved in a case. And so that really was also key for my mental health, to be kind of back to working.
And purposeful and doing something and giving back and the gratitude journal.
And you can do that from home. Only so much law. We have to, like, as a team, meet because these cases are complicated, overturning wrongful convictions. But there's so much I can do, on the files, like go through the DA files and everything. And so that was actually very, like, a blessing that came into my life during the pandemic.
Something good that came.
Yeah, something. Yes.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
No. I was just going to say, moving forward, what are some of the things you would share? It sounds like you kind of kept this to yourself. Your family knew about it, but then you came out a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, I've got an issue. This is what I've endured in my life. I want to make it right." Do you want to help others? How would you help others? Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah.
Here we are in 2021 now. The pandemic's hopefully. Yeah. So I just wondered, where would you like your life to be moving forward?
So really, because I am kind of entering a new phase with the youngest going to college.
Right.
Is to focus on the pro bono, or the working for the Innocence Project law. And then also, and I always said I wanted to be a mental health advocate. I don't want it to consume my life or define me. Sometimes, it can be too much if you're talking too much about it all the time. And, but I also realized I had a voice that was important. And so I'm happy I do, like small nonprofit luncheons, and I've given 2 public interviews. And I've said it all. That's my story. This is, it kind of started when I was younger. It's important. There's so much that goes into mental health, right? It's exercise, how you eat. There's also some people should be on medication, some shouldn't. And
Right.
I think any doctor that is not open to both, like, you don't just medicate. And but you also need to do talk therapy too.
Yes.
You can't just take medicine. Mm-hmm. And so going forward, I think sharing my story and while I don't get into specifics of medications, things like that, because I'm not an expert, but I can say my symptoms, and this is how I felt. And when I was depressed, and sometimes if all you can do is just survive that day, then that's all you have. I mean, just do that.
And
Try to
that's
give
okay. Yeah.
people hope. Sadly, sometimes we lose people to suicide. That it's like cancer. Sometimes the disease overtakes someone.
And I bet you going through all this now, it's been very liberating to share your story, to start talking about it, and to be in a better place. That probably feels really good right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. But then you worry, like, people, are they worry too much? And like,
No, I think you're helping people right now doing this with us. Really.
I mean, my family and friends, then like, oh, does she seem different now? And
everybody suddenly has an opinion, and they have sometimes people
That's
in a
out of your
negative
control.
way have make
right,
judgments.
that's the therapist, right? You don't listen to other people, right?
What did she say?
Everyone has an opinion, and you can't define yourself.
Yeah,
by
that's
that.
what
that's out of your control. Other people's opinions is out of your control.
Right, but that happens.
Yeah.
And everybody suddenly everybody's doing that in this world today. I mean, it's ridiculous. If you don't agree with somebody, or if they don't agree with you, I mean, it's really kind of sad. And that's what our world has become. Without getting into politics or any of that. I mean, just you can't say an opinion without being a good guy or a bad guy.
Right.
And so I just wondered some of those things and how, you suddenly let it out. And I'm sure there were people that had judgments of their own about, oh, really?
Right. And those that I've asked, I said, explain to me, share with me if you have an issue, why I'm speaking out.
Well, I think it's wonderful that you did.
I think it's great.
I
think it's fantastic.
The benefits far outweigh. I think you can save
for
lives.
you and for others.
Yeah, but so other people know, okay, I'm not alone. It's okay to get help.
Yes.
And I think the more people that are speaking out, and we're seeing it a lot, and I mean, Dak Prescott speaking out, and he was criticized by, we're not even going to go there, by some reporter, and he said I should show my vulnerability, and and that, and especially men are less likely, I think, to get help.
Absolutely.
So, and it's okay. And he's saying it's okay. I needed help. I recognized it, and I got help. And
which I thought was great.
And it's mental illness, depression. And some people may have one episode, but for me, it's something I'll always have to struggle and balance with. And I can, the world has been a sad world, especially the last year with the COVID, with the politics, just like you said, the whole, and then I have to be very careful with the shootings. Like, I can start to spiral in my head, about, why, why were 10 people killed in Colorado?
Yeah. And Michelle, something you said though, when you said it's just a part of my life now, I think it's a part of all of our lives, being mentally healthy, working on our mental wellness, because there's going to be challenges in life and struggles, and how do we cope? And we have to recognize that we have to be checking in up here a lot. And so that's why I like that you're doing it. I do that too, just to make sure we can all go to a different place if we're not careful.
Let me jump in here, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but you're the one with a PhD at the end of your name. So you've listened to what she's had to share. This is the first time you've ever met Michelle.
Yeah.
What would you, in a positive, productive way, what would you say if you, with all that you've heard just now, what is your diagnosis of her and how, to me?
Well, let me tell you.
Well, no, I'm serious.
Like, what is she going to say?
I think it's this. Well, I'll play doctor for a minute. Yeah. I think it's great that she's come out.
Yeah.
I think that's the number one thing of this whole scenario. She's shared it and allowed other people to say, hey, that's great.
Yeah.
How can we all work together to help you and to help others that are dealing with the same thing every single day?
Yeah.
So what would you say? Don't you think it's great that she's
Oh,
shared the message?
absolutely. And I think that you are an example of what being vulnerable and transparent is. And that's what makes you so authentic and real and relatable to everybody else. And that's what we all need to be more of. So there's always going to be opinions. And when I say that's out of your control, it really is. There's going to be opinions of all of us in this room for different reasons. What's in our control is our thoughts, our actions, our effort, and what we do. And what you're doing is speaking and being an advocate for mental health. So I really applaud that. And I love that you're just so honest about where you're at, and that it's a challenge sometimes, but it's a challenge for a lot of us. And just it's okay not to be okay all the time. So I just love what you're doing, and I'm just so grateful that you're here. And, some takeaways for the audience today, I think is, that gratitude journal, what a great way to stay optimistic that you do, and volunteering, getting out there. Is there anything else you want to share before we finish today that would be very helpful for somebody to give them hope today?
Kind of the takeaway, as they say.
I think that to educate yourself on mental health, so symptoms, and if someone starts to isolate that, there's some people that are, that if that's their normal, they're like a tech person that likes to just be on their own, that's one thing. But if you have a friend that all of a sudden is starting to isolate, or you notice, like when I get real anxious, I just can't eat. So I get thin. Some positive maybe. But if you start noticing symptoms, maybe, to reach out, and people say, if someone really expresses to you maybe a suicidal thought, that you need to address it head on with them. Like, let's make a pact, or, so don't be afraid of it. You don't want to constantly ask someone, are you okay? Whatever, and then they're paranoid to ever tell you anything, because then, but I think the biggest thing is, and really just loving them, like for family members, I think that's the biggest thing you can do. Because they're not professionals. They don't know how to address when the serious issues that you're dealing with. So I think, and that's, my parents like gave me unconditional love, and that, went a long way for me. And knowing that you have that, and then it's also trying to help. And in Dallas, it's the mental health world is kind of it's in a crisis, right?
Yeah.
And they still don't. As like my psychiatrist say, Michelle, we still don't really know what causes depression. Mm-hmm. And hopefully one day we're going to have genetics figured out, and maybe. But like, this was the best way he said it. The brain's like 100 billion neurons. So when you're treating someone, they're looking at molecular biological level, and then you're also at the philosophical level of how we view ourselves and others, right? It's very complex, and there's no right answers. And I think too, I take in opinions and what people think probably too easy. I think my emotions run deep, so that can get me like going.
Being careful. One of the things that stands out that you said is for people listening is just the love of family and people. Mm-hmm. If they don't know what to do, just love and just be supportive the best way they can, because that goes a long way.
Yes.
Yeah. And I also tell it when I spoke out, then, and I said all these mental health groups, I don't want a job in the mental health world, but I'll meet with everyone, help. How can we make Dallas better? Just the country better. Mm-hmm. But also I think it is hard for, like, a friend reached out to me, daughter in her 20s, her friend was depressed. And, it's also important not to take that on as your burden.
Yeah.
Like I tell it, like, I don't want, yes, love me and be there, but sometimes people need to be careful too that.
Set a boundary.
Set a boundary.
Yeah.
That it's not their burden to save somebody.
Right. Good. That's so true though.
I think that's important because we have lost people and they guilt themselves and, that's not their fault.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Did you have fun today?
Yes.
Did you?
Yep. Thank you.
Well, we can't thank you enough. Really.
Yeah.
Conversations of connection. I think we hit a home run with this connection here today.
We did.
Really.
Thank you, Michelle.
And connection. That's
yeah.
I think what COVID's damaged a lot is the human connection.
We're bringing it back.
Mental wellness in sports and life. We can't thank you enough. Yeah. Again, say hello to the family. You're a lucky girl. Your folks are two of the most incredible people I've ever met. And as a kid, number 12 was my hero. My dad was my hero, and but I just thought Roger Staubach hung the moon. So, umpteen years later, when I came here 40 years ago, it's hard to believe. He had just retired, and I remember covering him when I was in other cities, and I go, boy, that Roger Staubach, he is something. And then to come here and to call him a dear friend and your whole family, just special people for all that you represent and all that you stand for, and you're a part of that. And what you did here today. Home run. Yes. So thank you. And
thank you.
Our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family for continued success as you move forward. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks.
Michelle Staubach.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad you're here. And I guess we're wrapping up
Yeah,
today.
we are. Conversations of Connection, the name of the program, Mental Wellness in Sports and Life. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Until next time, I'm Scott Murray.
And I'm Dr. Nina Rios-Doria.
Stay safe.